Sure. I mean, if I look back to find, I mean, even today, you've got a lot of companies and founders who would say, "Great, Reliance now on board. You just go into something else or figure out something else." But I think the idea is, can we build this for the next 20 years or next 30 years also?
Yeah, that.
So I think that ways, I think it's absolutely right to sort of point that out.
Hi there, welcome to the Absolutely Right podcast, India's first graphology or handwriting analysis based leadership podcast. Every single Wednesday, we invite guests who are high performers, leaders, entrepreneurs, somebody who has broken the typical, the everyday, the normal way of solving the problem, living their life, choosing a career, and has done something which can be inspiring, something you and I can learn from to claim the best version of ourselves. Now, if you look at it calmly, if you understand people and personalities are all about the patterns that we cultivate, knowingly or unknowingly. So, when we interview people, we look at the patterns that are represented in their handwriting that talk about their mindset. Now, for many people, this sounds like an unbelievable thing to do. It is too easy to be true, and the show is designed to demonstrate how accurate this process is, how beautifully you can actually understand what's going inside your mind with the help of your body or your physical movement, which in our case is handwriting. Now, if you like it, if you don't like it, if you believe in it, if you don't believe in it, just give it a shot. And the story of each entrepreneur or high performer or leader is truly inspiring. Today, we have an IITian who has turned into a tech entrepreneur and runs a startup company called Fynd. Our guest on the show, Harsh Shah, is a co-founder of Fynd, India's largest retail technology-based platform that works with more than 600 brands and handles 10,000 plus outlets. Their technology-based solution allows the brand to create a better customer engagement. Harsh has learned many lessons as an entrepreneur on his journey of 9 years, and today he shares his insights and asks me questions about how he can become a better leader. If you are interested in becoming a better leader or understanding what makes somebody a visionary, this conversation is for you. Without further ado, let me get Harsh and get the conversation started. Hi Harsh, welcome to Absolutely Right. I am
Thank you
curious
so
to
much.
know how you found the find that you have found now. What is the story?
I think the simple story is we've always been on the lookout of doing something of our own. So there's me and Farooq, my other co-founder. We used to work together, and we were always on the hunt for ideas. Um, and I think we were exposed to a lot of analytics and consumer engagement behavior where we were working as
Right.
consultants. And we said, let's do this for shopping because we've done a bunch of projects for retailers in the US. And we said, you know what, this definitely a large opportunity even back in India.
Mhm.
And the company that we were working used to actually run an idea competition. The winner would get, I think, whatever, $15,000 in second and third place, and so on and so forth. So we submitted this idea in the competition. We ended up coming third, and we got like the People's Choice Award. So we got some $10,000 in that
Okay.
competition, which we actually funnily put into a different idea in the electronic health record space,
Okay.
right?
But this
So
was the
with
idea.
but this was the idea. The idea was
Okay.
essentially how do you use data and technology for the offline retail environment to
Mhm.
try and make the consumer experience better and also to bridge the gap between offline and online. So that
Okay,
was
pause,
that was
Harsh.
the core idea.
Harsh, pause. Now, please translate this in English for our listeners. What does
Okay.
it exactly mean?
So the idea was, see, as consumers, you were using technology much faster than how the stores, the brands were adopting technology, right?
Okay.
So that was sort of one piece of the puzzle. The second is there was a absolute
Which
explosion
which
in
means
online
you would
commerce.
go on Amazon and look at products. Is that
So not just Amazon, but how you would research for products, how you would access information, how you would share with your friends, how you would discover products on. I mean, at that time, Instagram wasn't that big, but
right?
Facebook and Pinterest and a few others, right? So,
Right.
so you would ideally walk into a store, maybe having more information on the brand and the product than the store associate there.
That's true. So back in the day, like in 80s and 90s, the salesperson had to explain everything.
Absolutely,
And here you
absolutely,
walk in and you ask them about the features because you're already
absolutely.
informed. Perfect.
Absolutely, right? And you would also walk into a store where you know what you want better than what the salesperson knows what you want. And as you said, in the 80s and 90s, it was the other way around.
Right.
So retail didn't really sort of, advance that much
True.
as fast as the consumers advanced.
True.
And that sort of put them on a back foot at the end of the day. So we said there's definitely a lot of disruption that can be possible out here. And can we use technology to help the stores do that?
Okay.
That was a simple sort of idea.
But people also, I'm sure, in your field must be trying to do the same. So, what made you the young achievers, the blue-eyed boys? What was so different about your company?
I think luck, honestly, right? I think it was a. I mean, it is so funny. It's just luck and probably cheekiness, I would say.
Okay,
Um,
cheekiness it is, okay?
so it was September 2012. Actually, no, August 2012. It's Bombay, so it's raining.
Right.
And we said, let's go to Juhu Tara Road. So I stay close to Juhu. And there were a bunch of these designer shops on Juhu Tara Road.
Yeah.
And someone said, why don't you sort of pitch your idea to one of these guys, right? Let's see how they like it. Because these are usually, designers who are slightly more edgy, slightly more trendy, slightly younger as well, and hence the adoption of technology could be faster.
Okay.
So, two dudes walking into a sort of, hot picture showroom and like sort of completely out of place out there, right?
Right.
And we say, okay, you know what, this is futile. Let's just go home. So we're standing outside waiting for an auto, and it starts raining. So we think we can't, be standing outside. And I have my iPad with me, and I'm actually more worried about the iPad than anything else. So we see a diesel store, and we say, let's just walk in here till the rain stops,
Right.
and then we'll sort of go back, right? We thought diesel is, this brand where, we see everywhere, and we bought on Fashion Street and Pinterest Street and whatnot. Little did we know what the actual diesel brand actually cost. But nonetheless, we just walk in. So we'll pretend to be customers, and then once the rain stops, we'll just go back out.
Yeah, you tried being a consultant, and that didn't work. So said, let's
That didn't
try
work.
the
So we said, let's pretend to be a customer till the time the rain goes away. So we do that, and we're sort of talking to the person who's trying to show us these 5-pocket denims and this wash and this whatnot, and we're like, okay, fine. And then we sort of try and we sort of strike a conversation. Turns out that the guy is actually the marketing manager for Diesel, and he's just doing his sort of weekly rounds to get a pulse of the customer, pulse of the stores, and so on and so forth. So we end up showing him, pitching our product to him, which is the idea that we tried in the other stores.
Right.
He said, this is interesting. Why don't you come meet my brand head tomorrow? Right. So I said, okay, this is interesting. Which is, I said, very, very lucky.
Lucky.
So we go the next day. We actually go meet the brand head. And he says, you know what? I like you guys. I like your background. You seem interesting.
Yeah.
Why don't you come up with something for Diesel? Take a week, go back and sort of show me some designs, some mock-ups.
And who was this? Who was the
this guy's name? Yes, this guy's name is Deval Shah. Diesel still today in India is actually being run by Reliance brands.
Right.
So actually life comes full circle in the last 9 years for me. So Deval says, come after a week.
I'm smiling because I'm connecting the dots, which our listeners will learn in like 5 minutes. Yeah, okay.
That's true, right? So Deval says, come next week. Give me an idea. So we sort of mock up a few designs, and at that time we sort of join hands with my third co-founder, Surana, who is sort of designer by education and by profession. And he said, okay, let me just quickly come up with some mock-ups. So we take those mock-ups and we said, okay, we'll put this on an iPad in the store. So we take off these A4 printouts, which is in the size of an iPad, and we sort of take it to them. And actually he's saying, interesting hai, but yaar kuch bada socho. You guys are technologists, and you guys have studied engineering, and kuch bada socho aap log.
Okay.
I said, okay. He's saying, take 1 more week. मेरे को कोई जल्दी नहीं है. Take 1 more week, पर कुछ बड़ा सोच के आओ. So again, go back and we're thinking कि यार क्या करें. A week goes by, nothing sort of comes across. And then we said and then I think there were a few rolls of chart paper lying around in, I think it was my house or Farooq's house.
Okay.
And he said, यार बड़ा सोचते हैं. So what we had printed on A4 sheet, we printed on A2 sheet, the exact same design. And we went in next week, and he said, "Hey, ये तो बहुत सही है. I
Really?
mean, yeah. So it's like this is awesome. Why don't you build this? So instead of building it on an iPad, build it for a 32-inch touchscreen."
Okay.
And that's how it started. So I think just
Wow.
a lot of luck and cheekiness, I would say, is
Oh,
how
now
we
I know what
found our,
you mean.
yeah.
Wow. So it took you a few years to figure out the initial
Yes,
grounding and figuring out exactly what you want to represent.
yes.
What were the challenges in that period as a startup, as a, like a new company with, it sounds easier than it is for most
Hmm,
people when they
hmm,
think about the startup world, and people are like, yeah, of course, you have this bright idea and then you go and find an investor and it is kind of done, which it is not.
hmm.
And after working with many, many startups, I'm aware of the internal struggles. Which were
Right.
your top three struggles when you started?
I think the first struggle was always to find the right team in order to make our vision into a reality, right? So I think that would be the number one struggle, and honestly, that struggle is there even today. I think we continue to always look for great people who can come join our team and help us build the company further. The second struggle was the fact that while we were doing this, we were presenting it as a customer engagement solution for brands and retailers, and customer engagement meant actually different things for different brands.
Mm-hmm.
So while the customer's decision-making criteria are similar, right, whether it's price, style, fit, trendiness, all of those things, everyone at least thought brands that my engagement is actually different.
Mm-hmm.
So a Nike will think that, and rightly so, that the engagement is different from an Adidas, from a Reebok, from a Puma.
True.
And we had to constantly rework and redesign our front end, the way our application worked for different brands.
As per
That
their
meant that
definition of
as
engagement.
per their definition of engagement, right? So we were never able to create a template that can be scaled with only marginal effort. So every time we would get into this sort of design, build, deploy cycle with every brand whatsoever. So that ended up not allowing us to create a platform or a template which could scale easily. Right?
Mm-hmm.
The third big challenge was that we were always sort of collecting money after the month was over. And unfortunately, I don't think Indian businesses are great with
Mm-hmm.
actually giving
Credit.
money. And I think credit is a different thing. I think forget about credit, even sort of giving money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we realized that we were not able to directly correlate impact to the use of our product.
Mm-hmm.
And the second is, of course, because of that lack of direct correlation, there would be a lot of sort of negotiation, even though the price was fixed early on. So they would say, "Oh, my store said that this didn't work as well this month, or customers didn't really find it good this month, so we'll sort of pay you later." And that sort of kept sort of rolling out. So we figured that there's a payment which is an issue,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a scaling which is an issue. And I think those two were like sort of the big issues.
So
Which,
people, payment, and scaling were three
yeah,
issues.
so I would say people in the sense wasn't the reason why we had to rethink what we were doing. People just like always, I mean, struggle, challenge. We're sort of always solving for it, right?
True.
But the other two were definitely reasons why we had to sort of go back to the drawing board and really think what we were building.
Okay.
And
And
that's why it sort of took us a couple of years to sort of find our footing.
okay. So tell us about why Reliance has come full circle for you.
So it's been close to about 9 years that we started the company. 9 years this month actually. We started
Congratulations.
off. Thank you so much. We started off with building technology for the offline world and with more consumer engagement. And Reliance was the first person through Diesel that actually gave us our shot. So they weren't a client per se where it wasn't a paid project that we did, but they gave us prime real estate, ground floor Diesel store in Palladium in Bombay for 2 months for a product, right? So absolutely high visibility, and that really sort of set the tone for our journey in the retail tech world. And I think 9 years, actually 7 years later from then, and for a couple of years now, Reliance now owns the majority share in the company.
Right.
And we, of course, started working with Reliance brands and the Diesel stores from 2017 onwards on a very different product.
Mm-hmm.
But from 2019 onwards, Reliance essentially ended up taking a large share in the company, and now they are sort of owners in the company along with us, and helping us build Fynd further. So
Wow.
that's where the full circle, where you're the first people to give us a break, and now we sort of
Co-own the brand.
support and help to sort of build this further.
How nice. Congratulations on that too, because very
Thank
few
you.
people who think through such ideas kind of figure out their exact match. So I'm
Thank
going to
you.
ask you more questions about what are your future plans and all of that. But before we do
Sure.
that, I want to get to your handwriting and talk about, according to graphology, what are the
Hmm.
secret success codes that we can find in your handwriting right now?
Okay.
First thing that stands out when I look at your writing is the horizontal line in your letter
Hmm.
T, we call it T
Okay.
bar, is
Okay.
long and steady line.
Okay.
Okay, that talks about your willpower to fight through any tough situation. So no
Okay.
matter
Interesting.
how the the signals look around, how people agree with you or not, if you are convinced in your heart, no matter whether logically that idea is appealing or practically it is
Hmm.
doable, you somehow figure out a way. And I think
Okay.
that is an
Interesting.
entrepreneurial skill for sure.
I think definitely it's. I mean, you're absolutely right in saying that it's a skill an entrepreneur should definitely have, without a doubt,
Yep.
because there's so many
And
naysayers and sort of people who challenge what we're doing. And I think that's it. But this is a very interesting understanding that I'm getting. Yeah.
and also the way you place that horizontal line is towards the top of your letter T, which
Hmm.
means that your plans are always long term. So at
Okay.
least 5 to 7 years down the line. So if you have to choose between an idea that will give you immediate results versus an idea which would eventually give you bigger results, you would always stick to the second idea. And people around you struggle to understand, why can't you quickly monetize things? Why can't you jump on this lowest hanging fruit? You look at them and you're
Hmm.
like, but why would you do that? Why would you not invest current time and energy because you have resources and you are still young? And why would you not do that to build something that would sustain us in a long run? Now, that I feel I highly contribute that one trait to your success, and also to being misunderstood so much around.
You should tell my wife that. Sure. I mean, if I look back to find, I mean, even today, you've got a lot of companies and founders who would say, "Great, Reliance now on board. You just go into something else or figure out something else." But I think the idea is, can we build this for the next 20 years or next 30 years also?
Yeah, that.
So I think that ways, I think it's absolutely right to sort of point that out.
Also, that makes you constantly seek the discomfort that other people avoid, which is beautiful and uncomfortable in so many ways. But you would always pick up that path which is not taken, path
Hmm.
that is according to you is the one should follow. And
Okay.
I would say
Interesting.
keep it up,
Thank you so
because
much. Thank you.
second thing that stands out in your writing is your ability to connect to other people. Because when you write, just look for the tall letter like T, L, H, and see
Hmm.
how they're tilted towards the right side of your page.
Okay.
Okay, but every time you write in this manner, like we call it slant, the writer
Hmm.
with the right slant actually have the ability to connect to other people's emotions, look at it more empathetically. So if you're talking to a customer, if you're talking to an end consumer, if you're talking to anybody from your team, you
Hmm.
constantly try to figure out what are they trying to solve here, what are they looking at, why are they fighting so much about this particular issue, why it matters to them. Now, these questions are interesting, and you are not doing them today. These
Hmm.
questions have always come to you, even as a young adult, as an engineer. And this
Hmm.
curiosity, I believe, is a key element for you to solve problems. What keeps you going? Like, I think if I have to define you in one word or two words, I would say you're a problem solver more than anything else. So if there is a challenge, if there is a problem, you would want to come up with the shortest possible or fastest possible solution that
Hmm.
can take the overall everybody, the team, the organization to the next level.
Hmm.
And if you can achieve that, you feel happy. If all the tick marks are done and if you think you haven't achieved the fastest or the easiest solution, then you don't feel happy about your achievements.
Okay, interesting. I mean, a funny story is I think all till my 12th standard, my writing was actually was absolutely straight.
Straight? Wow.
And it's only after that that I've sort of gone as a slant.
Now, let
It
me
was
just
more
tell
for
you.
speed more than anything else, I think.
Okay. Okay, nothing to do with speed actually.
Uh-huh.
It only means that you connect with other people faster. But
Okay,
the straight slant means that as a person you are more practical, you keep your emotions to yourself, you do not share your thoughts unless you're being asked. And when it comes to friendships, you take longer to trust the person before saying yes or no, which was
okay,
the case
interesting.
probably till you were 12, in your 12th standard, right?
Maybe. I
Correct.
think that definitely was the turning point. I wouldn't say it was more open. I think even in school I was quite sort of extroverted. I would dabble in multiple things. But I think the jump from school to say engineering college, especially staying in hostel and sort of having so many people around you
Yeah.
from all walks of the country across social stratas, I think that was definitely a huge a huge sort of growing up moment for me, I would
You
say.
know, people generally ask me that, oh, my handwriting keeps changing. How can it still talk about my personality? And the answer is exactly what you said. When we change as people, and if handwriting is mirroring you or representing your mindset, then it should change. And that's why I feel this, life change kind of situations lead to handwriting factors changing. And
Interesting.
yeah, that's fascinating. Always
Yeah.
for me.
I think I think while you've sort of definitely been very flattering about what has sort of helped me
I'm just getting started.
come here. I'm glad, right? I'm glad. But I'd love to understand more about how can I sort of overcome some of the pitfalls that I have. Like for
Sure.
example, I'm a super lazy person. I don't have too much of attention to detail,
Mhm.
and I think in general over how can I improve my leadership? How can I sort of during times get my energy and my motivations up? So I mean, what can you help me? How can you help me sort of answer those questions for me?
Okay. So to answer your question, are you a lazy person or not?
I
Now
think I
we
am.
Okay, so we look at laziness graphologically when your letter A and O are written in horizontally oval manner.
Okay.
If they're vertically oval,
Hmm.
then you have the energy to communicate, energy to get things going, and laziness is not one of your problems. Probably trying to find shortcuts could be your habit, but I would
Okay.
not say laziness is your problem. Just think about days where you are excited and clear about getting things done.
Hmm.
Do you think you're the lazy person that you think you are?
Not on those days. Not on those days for sure.
And then there are things that you're uninterested in.
Right.
So all the laziness comes only when you're not interested in doing something.
Understood. Understood.
So
Yeah.
let's
Oh,
not
that's
blame the
interesting.
laziness here. I think it's a lot to do with lack of interest and lack of
Maybe.
prioritization for those things.
Okay. Interesting. Interesting.
Second point you made is you have lack of detail. I agree with that point. And
Hmm.
we look at that from the lowercase letter I. When you dot that I, how careful you are about that I talks a lot
Hmm.
about your detailing.
Yeah, I
And
can see it now being all over the place, I think.
not only all over the place, mostly it is towards the right side, almost running
That's
ahead of
true.
it. And that is
Absolutely.
a great sign of impatience when it comes to detailing. So you do the strategy, you kind of find that larger idea, and you're like, now detailing, you take care of it. And then you get super impatient with your team. You're like, is it done? Is it done? It's almost like a little child going like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? But you do that. You're like, okay, how long does it take? Because when you see something, when you believe
Hmm.
in that larger idea, you want to see it as soon as possible practically being implemented, and that takes away from detailing. And I'm sure in the conversation when people don't get to the point, you get absolutely impatient. Just implemented the same trait implemented
Interesting.
in listening to other
Yeah,
people.
I think absolutely right. I think definitely, I think there is an impatience, and I think goes back to the sort of problem solving bit also. I think that sometimes once the problem is solved, I'm like, okay, so, I mean, I'm less bothered about the details post that,
Now
and then
this
just sort of
part
move
your
to the
wife
next
should
one.
not listen to.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I want to connect these two parts to your leadership style to begin with,
Hmm.
and we'll go in detail on that part. But somebody who gets impatient with people who want to get to the next idea, most of the time people around you are running on a treadmill or running around you just to keep up with you. I don't
Hmm.
think that is necessarily a bad idea as long
Okay.
as they're convinced about where they're going. The
Hmm.
only
Hmm.
challenge happens when people can't see the vision that you have in mind. And for you, it becomes an obvious thing. So I see that with many visionary people. So as leaders, you hold on to the plan, which is say 7 years, 10 years down the line, you want that to come true. And
Hmm.
every step that you're taking is towards that larger idea. Somebody
Hmm.
who's around you, whose vision is say for 2 or 3 years ahead of time, they only look at it in shorter span because you do not break down the larger idea and translate it in the manner they can understand. They run because you expect them to, versus people who are running because they're convinced about the larger idea. But that translation obviously requires a bit of patience to break it down, understand what they understand, and then, probably weave the story in their language.
Hmm.
It takes efforts and time, but if you spend that time and energy, it becomes theirs, and people then start owning up to the actions, which I feel is a little gap currently you must be experiencing as a leader.
Uh, I mean, right. I think mixed bag there. I think definitely for those who whom you would ask, they would definitely say that I am an impatient leader for sure. That there would be times where I would sort of give them their freedom, but I think there would come a point where post that I would just like, okay, this is just not going at the pace that I expected to, and post that I would just like keep sort of either pulling them or pushing them and say, no, this just has to happen faster, faster, faster. I think you're absolutely right on that. I think one challenge is that, and this again goes back to the same sort of leadership challenge and working with teams or managing teams, is that there's a diverse set of teams that I manage currently, right? And again, different roles, different functions, different capabilities, different levels, whatever. I think somewhere figuring out a balance approach doesn't really work because it has to be a specific approach to each individual and sort of each team, and then to sort of ensure that there is there is a way in which the asynchronous growth of teams, where sort of one team grows faster than the other team, or even one individual sort of moving faster than the other individual, and how do you sort of bridge that gap? Because I mean, I firmly believe that the organization is as strong as its weakest link, or the organization moves as fast as its slowest person. And just like sort of getting everyone to move at at a good pace. I think that's one challenge that I face across the different teams that I look at.
So before I even understand what kind of challenges that, I would say no matter how fast your teams run, for you they would always be slower than you expect them to run.
Okay.
So the very moment you will understand that, you will be frustrated, but at the same time, you'll have that awareness that I'm not only frustrated because they are slow, I'm
Hmm.
frustrated because I believe this can be done faster,
Understood.
right?
Understood. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I think I feel right on that.
so if you have two kids, one say a 2 year old and another one is say 7 years old, and you want them to run faster, then you understand the 2 year old will run faster as per his or her capacity, and the 7 year
Right.
old. Now, if you keep comparing, or if you keep comparing them with the ideal speed, it will only lead to more and more frustration.
Hmm.
So
Got it.
I
Got it.
think walking into the situation with that awareness by itself, that I am going to find people slower no matter what, will give you little bit more breather for them to catch up.
Understood. Understood.
Second point
Yeah.
here, I feel, is when you look at a project, because
Hmm.
you think in systems, when you think in creating a solution that can be applicable everywhere, you try to standardize the solution, which is a great thing, which is your strength when it comes to your actual product. But people cannot be standardized. And I,
Yep.
of
Yep.
all the people, can vouch for that. So a part of it can be standardized, and you'll always have that extra room that you have to create for each individual. I
Hmm.
feel that thinking is lacking.
Hmm. Hmm.
In a way, being a great product designer that you are, you think about people like parts of this puzzle as products.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
if we question that assumption, and if we go in saying that, okay, there is this black and white area where everybody can have consensus, but there is that gray area or blue, yellow, all other
Hmm.
colors.
I think I can definitely sort of relate to what you're saying.
Over to you, Harsh. Your turn to ask questions.
I think there are definitely these bouts of sort of low energy and sort of lack of motivation, any specific way that I can overcome that, especially during times where I have to do things which are which I'm uninterested in, right?
Okay.
How do I overcome the sort of low self motivation pieces there?
So I talk about this and this is for our listeners. It's not only about you being uninterested in one area, but
Hmm.
anytime we feel that this is boring, this is absolutely not interesting in terms of not intellectually stimulating, or but I have to do like paperwork, taxation, or for other
Hmm.
people cooking, whatever that is.
Hmm.
Now, a simple tool that we can use is involving all five senses,
Hmm.
which means that we try to understand stimulation only as an intellectual aspect of it.
Hmm.
But the very moment we start involving five senses, we start finding different connection.
Hmm.
So the quickest way to do it is grounding, as we call it, and figuring out, okay, right now, though I'm doing whatever paperwork I'm doing, what textures am I experiencing? What smell I
Hmm.
can do? And it may sound like a mindful thing,
Right.
exercise, and like, yeah, right, as if it works. Even if you have the doubt, and I'm also saying this for our listeners, try it out. See how involving your
Okay.
body can create that shift. Now, lots of workouts, when people do any form of workout, if they involve all five senses in that workout, it becomes way more effective. Like
Hmm.
they
Hmm.
constantly say that about yoga practices. Okay, if you're doing yoga practice, make sure that you breathe and you see your body moving and all that. Basically bringing your
Hmm.
body to that
Hmm.
experience. So that is one quick way of going about. Because I'm also saying this to you because if I look at your handwriting, it is predominated by the challenges and problem solving and intellectual mm, concerns that can keep you on your toes. Now, when
Hmm.
somebody is so engaged only in the cognitive part of their work, then physicality feels like boring and slowing you down, which may
Hmm.
or may not be true if you practice these five senses every single day. And second thing, which I feel is
Hmm.
more relevant for you, is figuring out the why behind that what. So
Hmm.
we lose interest when we do not see what is my reason of doing this. If someone else can achieve it, why should I do it? If
Hmm.
I don't have anything to learn here, why should I waste my time? If we kind of take a moment and instead of just dragging our feet and going about things because we have to, if you create your problem statement that you wish to
Hmm.
solve,
Hmm.
if you come up with, like, it could be something that is only concerning you. And I'll give you a completely unrelated example. I don't know whether you cook or not, but I didn't for
Hmm.
the longest time, and I went into the kitchen for the first time, I think 2 3 years ago.
Hmm.
And when I looked at it as a hobby and not as a necessity, I could look at my challenge as getting that exact sambar recipe. And
Hmm.
for other people it's like, just cooking sambar, what's the big deal, why are you making like
Hmm.
such a coaching process out of it? But it is
Hmm.
not, it's such a mundane activity. And because I wasn't interested before that, when I
Hmm.
broke it down and tried creating my standard, my challenge in that, it became a different experience altogether.
Interesting.
So if you're
Interesting.
doing the paperwork that you're not interested in, probably make a mathematical puzzle out of it and see how can you organize it in a manner, or how can you solve this puzzle in the way other people don't do it, or try to have time bound challenge, whatever works for you. But when you gamify such things, then you're playing the game and not necessarily doing the so-called boring work. And I think that
Got it. I'm gonna try that tomorrow for
let me
sure.
know how you find that one.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So Harsh, I ask this question to every single guest that we get, and we get some amazing people who are, from
Hmm.
being Guinness World Book Record holders to, great leaders. If our listeners got to learn certain things from you, if there are three lessons that you think are really, really important, what would
Hmm.
they be?
So I think there are definitely the top three things that at least I strive to sort of follow. And I think these have all been sort of put forth more or sort of better by sort of others, and sort of borrowed their sort of terminology and language for it. But I do relate to that very often, and sort of always felt the undercurrent of that in whatever I'm doing. I think the first is this concept of an infinite game, right? I think as kids growing up, we've always grown around sports, or the way our education system is always sort of towards a particular exam, right? And I think everywhere, what uh, or one can sort of synthesize those into what you call as finite games. that have very specific boundary conditions, that have very specific players, very specific win lose scenarios. There's an
And rules to play by.
and rules to play with. There is an objective scoring mechanism. There's a definite end time, and so on and so forth. But for the last 9 years of sort of running a company, I think it's very clear that what people talk about sports should not be sort of applicable to life. And I think life is more an infinite game where there are no boundary conditions, where there are no specific players, where there can be win-lose and lose-lose scenarios altogether. There are
It's so
no sort of objective.
interesting. This is so interesting that you say last three guests who are also very active in their sports career or hobby spoke about the correlation between sports and life. And you
Right.
here, on the contrary, talking about how it is not related and how you got
I
to make
think
it different. That's amazing.
I think what you can sort of correlate definitely is sort of breaking up your life into those bite-sized pieces. But even that sort of doesn't give you a complete picture. I mean, you can't sort of create. I mean, the map for the territory sort of will lose a lot of details there. And I think a few things that sort of sport teaches us, where especially when you've got finite resources,
Hmm.
how do you sort of choose a team out of finite resources, right? When you've got adversity, or you've got to bounce back, or more importantly, have you got to continuously improve yourself. So I think those are there, but I don't think you can live your life based on that. I think you've got to sort of acknowledge and be cognizant of the fact that life is an infinite game.
Hmm.
And I think when I sort of read that, it sort of made so much more sense. I mean, earlier people would say at best that life is not a sprint, it's a marathon, right?
Right.
Because they would try and sort of elongate the timeline and sort of that. And I am a marathon runner, so I did sort of um, uh, um, did I did sort of relate to that. But the moment I sort of heard about the concept of the infinite game, I think that sort of struck a sort of
Can
huge
you give
chord.
us an
So
example here? How do you implement this infinite game in a business situation?
okay, so I think let's take a simple thing on a day-to-day basis, right? So um, I run, I run the business development, the sales team at Fynd, and I think a lot of times, sales would be said, you just have to close at whatever price that's possible, and so on and so forth. And if you lose this deal, it's gone, and your competitor will get it, and so on and so forth. And I think over time, what we've seen is that we would have stuck to a certain principles of ours, something like we will not do it under cost, right? I mean, we definitely will make money on everything we do. We will not do it for the wrong reasons. We will not sort of overcommit just to sort of win the deal, and so on and so forth. And you've seen that 3 or 4 years later, sort of client comes back to us and says that, hey, you know what, guys, I did choose someone else over you 3 years ago because they were cheaper. And they said that they will do these 3, 4 things also for me, which you said that you will not do. But I'd rather now work with you guys because you guys, rather than being the cheapest or over promising it, you guys sort of went down and ensured that you've done the basics right. And hence I know that you are more expensive than my current sort of
Window.
partner, but I'll still choose you guys over it.
So
So I think
what you're saying is also it may look like that you're losing in the current game, but
right.
because it's an infinite game, you're not necessarily
Absolutely.
losing.
Absolutely. So I
Huh.
would say, I mean, that's sort of, one way of doing that. I think the second is sort of in the whole product development life cycle, right? Everyone says, hey, you know what, we'll do this feature and the customer will sort of, get engaged, or customer will acquire millions of customers just by doing these things. But there's no sort of, end to a product. I mean, there's a version 1, 2, 3, and they'll keep going. I think Facebook is on version 200 and something or 700 and something. I forget, but that's the other sort of play, right? I mean,
True.
you just have to keep going on and on. So I would say that's sort of the two examples of the infinite game that sort of comes to me.
Okay. Point number two.
Point number two was, I think, slightly closer to sports, I would say, and that was more in the sort of continuously improving yourself on a daily basis. So of course, um, again, there's a dichotomy here that I think change is triggered in a step function, in the sense that, and I think those who sort of studied chemistry can relate to the concept of activation energy,
Mhm.
where there needs to be a threshold beyond which a reaction has to happen, right?
Just
Um,
to break it down in a simpler example, we can say the boiling point of the water is 100 degrees, and anything below
right,
that is not boiling. and anything above
Absolutely.
that is steaming, so it's not boiling.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
there has to
So
be
I
a
think,
specific condition that you
right. So you've got to sort of, change will happen, or at least impact is visible. I'm not going to say change will happen, but I'm saying the impact is visible, only in step functions. But however, to achieve change, you need to do everything on a daily basis, right? Right.
Wow. Wow.
So I
That's
would
so
say that,
powerful. That's so powerful.
uh,
And also like the analogy where you're saying that it is only when you reach the threshold other people will realize. But you
right.
don't have to wait for that for you to take everyday actions. That's amazing.
Absolutely. Of course, this is not applicable to me not going to the gym every day, uh, but, but I would say, and sort of linking that to, the concept of sort of continuous self improvement, where every day you should try and be better. And there's this poster in our office which says that, 1 + 1% raised to 365, essentially saying that, you improve 1% every day is equal to 2, and 1 - 1% is to 365 is equal to sort of zero point 0.5. So I think the idea is that if you can just, you know, improve yourself by 1% every day, you're going to be twice as better as what you are today next year. And I think that's where, that's the sort of second concept of, continuous self improvement that I would take.
I think that's so important, and because people forget that, because they wait for the results to show up immediately, they move away from the process and only wait for the results. So
Yeah.
it allows
I
you.
mean, in sort of financial terms, you would say, do an SIP, right?
Yeah,
Don't wait for, oh, once I get so many lakhs, I'll invest in the market. No, even if you have to do, 1,000 rupees every month, just do that
every
SIP,
day,
right? So,
whatever
or every
possible.
day, whatever possible, right? So I think it sort of comes down to that as well. But yeah, it's a concept of sort of continuous self improvement, that is there. And in
Brilliant.
I mean, for that, I would treat work as sports, because I can sort of, in sports, you're constantly looking to improve on a daily basis. But yeah, I mean,
So Harsh,
that would be sort of
on a
point number two.
personal level, how do you evaluate your personal growth? What do you do exactly?
So I think one is, I think, expose myself to sort of as much of sort of, as many things as possible. So I think, the idea of, again, range. So I think, David Epstein, has written a book called Range, which again talks about, how exposing someone to as many situations as possible, absolutely unrelated or related, will just help the person open the sort of their mindset, just a little bit more, and you would not know where you'll end up learning, new things from. So I would say, I think, exposing myself to as many things as possible on a daily basis
So if you
would
have
be
to
something that,
give an example that when people travel and they see different cultures and different, point of views of people
right.
lives, they get like more open and you never know how that leads
No,
to
no,
different.
absolutely. And it's not just those things. Like, even when you're traveling, like, I mean, for example, I love always going to an observation deck, right? So I mean, everyone does, right? You want to see from a high point, but I love doing that both during the day and the night. So I mean, I get to see not just how a city looks or a place looks during the day, but also how it looks during the night as well. And it's just that
Yeah,
do everything.
I'm thinking about every time I have gone on an observation deck, I only observe people and I'm like, how excited they are, how they're relating to
Absolutely.
this. So it's like a treat for me to watch people
Right.
in that engaging activity, and I can spend hours there. But I hear you, like, different kind of perspective
Yeah.
from
So
the same.
absolutely, absolutely. Right. So I mean, different perspectives from the same vantage point. So I think just developing range is sort of one thing. So I would, like I said, do as many things that I can during the day. Um, I think second piece would be, I've actually kind of made a list of people that I want to talk to at least, once a week, right? So, and these are people whom I've known over the last few years. I've just not been in touch with, and I'm sort of pushing myself to say, I need to at least talk to one person whom I haven't spoken to at least in the last couple of years every week, right? So I mean, again, and it's like a no agenda catch up, but just like sort of helps you, again, of course, get back in touch with that person, sort of rekindle, a sort of lost relationship per se, but also just sort of understanding their point of view, because that person's also changed since the last time you met them, and just a very different view that they would give you. So I would say that would be the sort of second thing that I try to do. And I think I think the third thing that I try to do um, is to try and um, get myself involved in sort of different things. So um, I'm kind of the secretary of my sort of building as well society, and I don't know why I took it on, but I mean, hindsight, sure, I learned something different, but I mean, just like it just I just wanted to be involved in it. So I mean, it was just that. So I would say that would be sort of the third thing. Is just
Okay.
trying to get myself involved in different
So
things.
coming back to the points that we were making, you were
So
talking about the third point there.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
So third point there is, I mean, there's of course a song that says, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Um, but I think a better word for that is sort of the concept of anti-fragility, which has been floated by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, and I think talks about how it's not just good to be resilient and fragile, but if sort of going through that only improves you, and when that's the concept of sort of anti-fragility, I think that's what you should be aiming for, right?
Can
So
this is so beautiful and powerful. I want our listeners to
I
kind of.
mean, a bad example would be the mythical creature Hydra, where if you cut off one head, two grows in its place. But I think the idea is that you would sort of push yourself to your intellectual or sort of physical curiosity level as much as possible, where you would suddenly sort of realize, oh, you know what, this is something that also I could do. Whether you succeed in what you want to achieve or not doesn't matter, but just figuring out that oh, interesting, right? I mean, I think something there would be, um, again, sort of cricketing, a cricket example would be, sure, no one likes their team to go through a sort of absolute batting collapse, but just exposing number 7, 8, 9 to sort of more opportunities to bat will actually make them better batsmen, right? So,
Right.
I mean, that's the sort of concept of sort of anti-fragility there is.
Yeah, yeah. The new Marvel movie Black Widow also has this line where she keeps referring to her mother saying, "Pain will only make you stronger."
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I actually said, saw that last night only. So I mean, I can
Yeah.
definitely relate to that. Yeah, that's true. I mean, she keeps saying that,
Pain only
pain
makes
only
you.
makes you stronger. Yeah,
Yeah. So yeah,
yeah.
sounds good. Thank you so much. I think we have definitely left our listeners with few more areas to look at, different perspectives to approach
Hmm,
the problem, and to claim your best version. Definitely, you have to question things that are comfortable, things that are already working, things that other people think are great about you.
hmm,
And when you spoke about the range example, it totally makes sense because if you don't expose yourself, if you do not find newer things that you can be good or bad at,
hmm.
you'll never know what all you can become. I really like that. That was like my key takeaway from the conversation. Thank you so much, Harsh. Thank you so much for joining me one more time on the Absolutely Right podcast. I think from today's episode, if I have to pick up one thing that I'm going to ponder about, or my lesson or takeaway, then it would be increasing your range. When we keep doing one thing over and over again, we obviously get trained and we get better at it, but creating the diversity, learning horizontally allows your brain to be activated in the areas in ways that otherwise you might not be aware of. So picking up a new physical regime, mental regime, emotional regime can genuinely add value. And I truly believe in this concept on APT, which is India's first mental and emotional gym that we started 3 months ago. We speak about tools like that without having the need to, without having the challenge at hand to solve a problem. We work on building emotional and mental fitness tools, and something that we all require to learn. We meet our mental health when it is crumbling. It's almost like looking at our physical health when we are getting hospitalized for high cholesterol or something else. But for people who build their mental and emotional fitness, they practice these tools on a regular basis, and the performance, their ability to deal with or cope up with actual new problems, enhances. If you want to join our free workshop or want to know more about this program, then you can go on the link aptforme.com. If you wish to learn graphology as you are as awestruck as I am, or if you want to engage with us on a professional, organizational, or personal level, then all the information is available on aditisurana.com. And if you want to give me feedback, tell me how this conversation is shaping you, changing the way you look at life, or which part you actually enjoy, then you can write to me on write, WRIT, at aditisurana.com. I'll see you on Friday with one more episode of the Absolutely Right podcast. This time we are in the middle of a graphology series. Till then, happy writing.